Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to the good people of the conference who put all this together. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the campaign we ran and why we made the decisions that we made. But before I get to the actual program, I think it's important to talk about the structure. A campaign is a kind of interesting challenge. It starts overnight, and if it's a US presidential campaign, by the next day, it's one of the best funded and most watched startups in the entire world. And it's got only one purpose, which is, of course, to win. But if you start a campaign in April of 2011 for an election that's not until November of 2012, then you've got 16, 17 months of work to do before you can actually set about trying to win. And so the day-to-day focus becomes an organizational one. It becomes a structural one. It becomes, how do you set up a team and how do you set up a set of processes that are going to put you in a position so that you can win when the time comes that you can actually start worrying about that. Now, so for those of you who are marketers, we set up a structure within our department that's going to be very familiar to you. We thought of ourselves as being an agency in-house on the campaign. And we actually had a position that we didn't have in 2008 that was akin to sort of an account management role. Now, these accounts weren't external clients, of course. They were battleground states or other departments. But we had people whose jobs were to manage expectations, manage timelines, and focus on the politics, both the politics of the building and the politics of the election, so that all of the creatives they worked with, all of the designers, the developers, the writers, the videographers, could focus exclusively on being the best creatives they could be. I think even more importantly was how we were structured outside of our department. You know, I talk to a lot of people who work in big businesses or agencies that predate the sort of advent of the internet, and they've got issues like, you know, there's a marketing department, there's a communications department, there's PR, now there's technology. Everybody wants a piece of the digital pie, and nobody gets along in the first place. And it's created such a state of disarray that in the sort of corporate digital world, that if a cookie manufacturer, you know, puts out a tweet during the Super Bowl, that's global news. Well, we didn't have those problems on the campaign because we were a startup that built itself from scratch in April 2011. We already had an idea of how communication was going to work. We had an idea of how our structure needed to work. There was no notion that digital would be broken out into several departments. There was no notion that, that we would be subordinate to communications or to fundraising. We were our own department and able to focus on our own metrics. And that was incredibly important, I think, to everything that you're going to hear about next. Now, we did, of course, have the legacy of the 2008 campaign, but a lot has changed since the 2008 campaign. Mitt Romney's purchased an iPad, which is an important development. If there are any people sympathetic to Romney in this room, that's my last joke about him, so you won't have to listen to that for the next 45 minutes. But, you know, in 2008, for all that campaign was celebrated for how savvy it was and how effective it was in the use of digital media, that was a time when Facebook was about a tenth the size it is today. Twitter was really in its infancy. I mean, if you had used the word Twitter and the word strategy in the same sentence, nobody would have listened to you. And even the smartphone, it's sort of impossible to remember a time when you couldn't check your email every 5 minutes. The iPhone was invented in the summer of 2007, during the first campaign. President Obama was already running by the time that was invented. And so I think we tend to forget just how far all these technologies have come. And what that meant for us, and what that means, I think, for those of you who work in this space, is not just that you've got to learn how to do a lot more stuff, not just that you've got to master the tactics of this and that platform, although you do. It also meant, and we believe it meant, that people relate to campaigns and they relate to organizations in a fundamentally different way than they did as recently as 4 years ago. They have a lot more power now. And with that power comes a lot higher expectations for how they're going to be treated. We used to say that if in 2008 we had been off the mark somehow, we had not treated people the right way, our content had not been timely enough, not local enough, we hadn't given people what they expect, well, that wouldn't have been good, and they might have clicked away. In 2012, they would click away and then tweet about why they've lost confidence in the president. And so that's a lot more power now than they ever had before. Now, of course, a lot hasn't changed. And I think we lose sight of this, too. And there were two things that we tried to keep in mind really hadn't changed for us between 2008 and 2012, and long before 2008, for that matter. First of all, our goals as a campaign had not changed. And I would imagine that most of your business goals have not changed. We were trying to recruit volunteers, register voters, persuade people, turn them out to vote, and raise money to support those four things. And it was really that. We didn't have goals for how many app downloads we wanted. We didn't have goals for video views. We didn't even have goals for Facebook or Twitter growth. We were exclusively focused on the exact same business goals we were focused on 4 years earlier, the exact same business goals that we would have been focused on in 1968, 40 years earlier, or 1972, 40 years earlier. The other thing, and this may seem self-evident, but I think we lose sight of it, is that people haven't changed, and human nature hasn't changed. And people's lives are a little busier now. They have more devices. They've got more going on, more ways to connect to each other. And so that's obviously changed our day-to-day lives. But we believe as a campaign that we're fundamentally driven by the same things that we've always been driven by. We want to be inspired. We want to have connections. We want to have friendships. We want to be treated with respect. We want to be given things to do that are meaningful. We don't want to have our time wasted. We don't want to be misled or lied to. It's really pretty simple. And we believe that if we honored those values, if we stayed true to the things that people have always wanted, that they would go out and do a lot of work for us. I said that in 2008, Facebook was in its relative infancy, or at least was a fraction of the size it is today. Now, President Obama has 34 million Facebook fans. Those 34 million Facebook fans are friends with 98% of the US-based Facebook population. That's more than the number of people who vote. And so we believe that if we stayed true to these values, if we treated people with respect, if we gave them an experience they wanted, if we gave them a reason to stick with us, keep opening our emails, hit the retweet button every now and again, hit the forward button, hit the share button, that they would go out and do our work for us and do it more powerfully than we ourselves as a campaign could. Because people are skeptical of political communications. They don't like advertising. They don't like rhetoric, but they trust their friends. And so that really was the question for us. The question wasn't how can we optimize this or that by 5 or 10%, and certainly we put a lot of time into optimization, and I'll talk about that. But on a fundamental level, the question was how can we build a relationship with our people? How can we treat them with respect? How can we give them an experience that's going to keep them engaged? Because if we didn't do that, they could cause a lot of damage for us, a lot more damage than they would have been able to cause in 2008. And we felt that if we did do that, they would go out and win the election for us, and indeed they did. So with that said, I'm going to talk about the three sort of camps into which we organized our actual goals as a team: messaging, fundraising, and organizing. And so I'll talk about all three in turn. When it came to messaging, the task of giving people a good experience was really quite simple, and it came down to this: don't be lame. Now, this seems self-evident too, but all of you know that when you're bogged down in internal disputes, when you've got requests coming at you every which way, if you're dealing with politics or if you're dealing with a big corporation, there's news stories that aren't useful and you're trying to figure out how to navigate those, it can actually be tough to remember that at the other end of the email list, at the other end of the Twitter feed, you're talking to a bunch of actual people who probably don't care and who probably think all that is a little lame. And your challenge is to find what actually does matter through all that noise. Find the story behind the policy dispute, the policy abstraction that nobody can follow when it happens in Washington, when it happens on C-SPAN, but that actually matters to people's lives. Or to find the issue that's really being fought over when you see politicians going at it in Washington in that horrible way that makes people turn off to politics, but that actually has an effect on people. And so we always tried to find those nuggets and figure out how to illuminate those stories behind the stuff about politics that turns people off. So for example, how do you get 1.5 million people to read a blog post about tax policy? We felt on the campaign that Mitt Romney's tax plan didn't add up. It was a big giveaway to millionaires and billionaires. There was no explanation from him as to how he was going to pay for it. And so we had to communicate that, and we had to communicate that in a way that would actually resonate with people. So we created this little site. It was called RomneyTaxPlan.com, and if you went to it and tried to click the Get the Details button, I'll just let it go on for a bit. You couldn't. Now, this thing got liked on Facebook 1.5 million times. It got tweeted out 70,000 times. It's the only time in my entire career that my own mother has sent me something that I put together and said, "Did you see this?" And I had to say, you know, Mom, you really don't understand what my job is, do you? But more importantly, 1.5 million people read the actual blog post associated with this sort of joke of a site. Because if you tried to click within the first 8 seconds, nothing would happen and the button would move around. If you tried to click after that, you'd click through to the post where we actually explain the math. Now, we checked the bounce rate, we checked the time on site. All of the metrics that we had at our disposal suggested that people actually stuck around and people actually read the blog post behind this. And what I love about this example is this is not just us putting a press release on our website and trying to make it as pretty as can be. This isn't even just a video, which on some level is just a TV ad put in a different format. This is a kind of content that simply couldn't have existed before the internet. It literally couldn't have existed. And because it was funny, because it was shareable, it actually made our policy point more effective than I think a white paper would have. I don't think that a white paper from our policy director would have been liked on Facebook 1.5 million times. Now, we of course also, and I apologize here for the somewhat braggy photo, but I think if you had one like that, you would use it in your presentations too. We also tried to go where hold your applause. We also tried to go where people are and not just bring them to our own channels. I don't know how popular, I'm actually curious, how popular is Reddit.com here? Is it in wide use here? Not particularly, it seems like. In the States, it is a sort of an underground but extremely popular site. So it doesn't get a lot of mainstream coverage. It gets a lot more coverage now than it did before. But it has millions and millions and millions of users. And more importantly, it's sort of a driver of virality out to other websites. So things that originate on Reddit often wind their way, sort of becoming viral on Facebook and Twitter. Now, Reddit, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a site without an editorial presence whatsoever. People post things. Other people can vote them up, vote them down, and whatever gets the most upvotes gets to the top of the site. So there is no controlling it. It's the Wild West. The signature event or the signature sort of content type of Reddit is a live chat called an Ask Me Anything, where people, they can be prominent people or they can just be people with interesting life stories who aren't particularly prominent at all, submit themselves to questioning from the community. And again, there's no telling what could happen. Whatever questions get voted up, you don't have to answer, but everybody can see if you're not answering the ones that are at the top of the page. And so it was a sort of a risky maneuver. So we had President Obama do one of these on August 29th, 2012. And it went very well. A lot of people read it. My favorite stat was actually that he posted a link to our voter registration site, and 30,000 people clicked on that link and went to register to vote as a result of that hyperlink. But what I liked the best was that when I got home that night and started looking at blog comments and tweets and things like that, people said things like, the mere fact that he had done it was more important to them than anything that he said. The fact that he understands the way communication is changing, the fact that he's heard of Reddit, the fact that he's the kind of person who's willing to subject himself to an interview format in which there's no telling what can happen, and he did get weird questions and he took every single one, showed them that he understood them, that he cared about the way technology and communications are going, and said more to them about him and his character than any of his policy answers. We also, of course, understand that politics is not just about policy. It's about emotions. It's about the personal. So if you guys, anyone in the States would remember this, and I would bet many of you guys do too. The night of Mitt Romney's speech at the Republican convention, they had Clint Eastwood give a kind of a performance piece where he sort of yelled at a chair right before Governor Romney went on. And it was seen as very disrespectful. And as we were in Chicago monitoring tweets and looking at what the social conversation that night was, it was clear that even after Governor Romney had spoken, people were still just talking about this Eastwood thing. And what's more, our people, our supporters, the people who we cared the most about, the people who were going to go out and do our work, felt slighted. They felt like the president had been offended, and they felt like we needed to respond. And so we put out this Facebook post and tweet. It was a picture of the president, actually in a chair, and it said, "This seat's taken." We had no expectation that it would take off in the way that it did, but it became our most retweeted tweet ever up to that point. It wound up being overtaken on election night with 63,000 retweets and 500,000 likes on Facebook. The following week was our national convention in Charlotte. By the time we got there, people were actually selling T-shirts and buttons that said, "This seat's taken," with that same photo on it. And so this really resonated with people. And again, I think, similarly to that tax site, if we had put out a statement from the campaign manager or from the press secretary expressing our disappointment with the decision made at the RNC, I don't think that thing would have gotten 500,000 likes. This was true, social, rapid response, a kind of content that didn't exist before the internet and that speaks the language of the internet. It's short, it's funny, it's shareable, it sort of invites comment, it uses imagery, it uses illusions. And that's, I think, the reason why it was successful to the degree that it was. And so that's where we tried to be. We always tried to be at this juncture of making our actual point, but trying to inspire people, trying to get people engaged, trying to give them a reason why they wanted to share something or add their comment or add their voice to something. The most insightful thing that I've heard said about social media in the past few months was said by the founder of BuzzFeed.com. How popular is BuzzFeed here? Again, seems like not particularly. BuzzFeed is a very popular social news site in the US. They create content that they think is designed to be shareable. And they really put a lot of thought and a lot of science into how they create this content. And what the founder of BuzzFeed said is that celebrity gossip doesn't work all that well for them, and they don't do a lot of it. And isn't that kind of interesting, because doesn't everybody love celebrity gossip? And he says, well, yes and no. Celebrity gossip is a guilty pleasure. So maybe you're at the airport and you buy a People magazine because no one you know is around, but you don't necessarily want to stand up in front of all your friends on social media, on Facebook, and say, what I really care about is who just got divorced. And that's, I think, an incredibly powerful lesson about about how social media and the internet work. If you think about a Venn diagram of what you actually care about and what you want your friends to see you as caring about, think about the overlap, and that's what people share. And we had that exact same experience on the campaign that this guy's talking about at his social news site. If you go back and look at our Facebook, at our Twitter from June, July, August of 2012, you'll see we didn't do a lot of hits on Governor Romney. And it wasn't because we didn't have a negative message to spread about why we thought Governor Romney wasn't right for the country. It was because, similarly to the celebrity gossip thing, we discovered through experimentation that people may despise Mitt Romney. Many of them think twice before they decide they want to share that with all their friends. That's not the image they want to present. That's not the message that they want to clutter their friends' newsfeed with. And so the stuff that worked best for us were issues like LGBT issues, women's rights issues, the environment, education. Things like this post that's on your screen, a nice quote from the president designed nicely about education in America. And those are the issues that we found people were willing to stand up and say, you know, I'm affiliated with that, or at least suggest that by putting that onto their Facebook, putting that onto their Twitter. And that was one of the key observations we made. Now, of course, sometimes the best thing we could do is just get out of the way. Especially when we were talking to undecided voters. So what you're looking at right now is the jobs chart. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States puts out new data on jobs every month. And every single month we would take that chart. We would not design it at all. We did not put the word Obama on it except to note when he took office. We did not put the little O logo that's very famous on it. We just let it speak for itself. And when we showed this chart to undecided voters, it would actually change conversations more powerfully than any other piece of content we had. And people would actually say, you know, I got to be, you know, they would often sort of turn sheepish and say, I got to be honest, I didn't know that. And so we ended up putting this out in the mail, giving this to volunteers to hand out at the doors. And I think it was more powerful because it wasn't branded, because it was just the facts, and people trust that. Now, when we're talking to supporters, obviously, we have a much different charge. Again, we're trying to inspire, we're trying to engage, and we're trying to show people that we honor them, that we respect them, trying to show them how they're a part of the Obama story. So I'm going to show you a video. It's on the long side. It's about 4 minutes, so settle in. I think you'll enjoy it. We put out this video in February of 2012. It was the 5-year anniversary of the president announcing that he was going to run the first time in February of 2007, and it's sort of a chronicle of the first 5 years of that journey. And it actually makes use of this jobs chart in a very different way. So hope you like it.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America. And standing up with courage, they somehow managed to change the world. Yes, we can.
Barack Obama has won the Iowa caucuses.
You have done what the cynics said we couldn't do.
He's the first candidate we've ever seen who had an organization that brought together the internet and community organizing.
He makes me care, and he makes me want to get up and go and do something with my life.
The next Vice President, Joe Biden.
I move Senator Barack Obama be selected by this convention as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States.
A small-town mayor is sort of like a community organizer, except that you have actual responsibilities.
A fist bump, a pound, a terrorist fist jab? Fist bump, please. Oh, yeah. All right.
First shot, straight through. That's how you perform under pressure.
After a hard-fought battle, it all boils down to today.
11 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have news. There will be young children in the White House for the first time since the Kennedy generation.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
And so it began. He faces a severe economic crisis at home and an increasingly dangerous world abroad.
I don't know how passing health care will play politically, but I know it's right. We are going to get this done. We are going to make history.
That's the most persistent fly I've ever seen.
Nice. Now, where were we?
I signed this bill for my daughters and all those who will come after us. So in love. We are not a nation that says, don't ask, don't tell. We are a nation that says, out of many, we are one. This is done. The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. One of the first decisions that I made as president was to save the U.S. auto industry from collapse. I am sending this Congress a plan called the American Jobs Act. You should pass this jobs plan right away. This is a make or break moment for the middle class and for all those who are fighting to get into the middle class. Welcome home. Welcome home. If you stick with me, we're going to finish what we started in 2008. America, we have come so far. We have seen so much. But there's so much more to do.
So, am I on? So there's